with what the reality of your situation is. So it's not doing more in a sense like a top spinning faster and faster. It's just the consciousness behind the activity becomes more focused on Krishna and Krishna's pleasure. That's the bhakti doing more principle. Now, there may be additional service, but it may also simply be additional qualitative service. Let's say one can increase the number of rounds and one can increase the quality. Supposing one increases the number of rounds without increasing quality, or there's decrease in quality because you're trying, chant faster and you're not being attentive. So whatever. So that it's qualitative doesn't become a 0, but it doesn't become a 10. The 10 is qualitative. But when qualitative is there, then there's an increase, quantitative. A very powerful Vaishnav can do so many things. Because they're powerful. Okay.
Thank you very much, Maharaj.
Behind you.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you for the wonderful class and so many nice points that you mentioned. Couple of things.
We're just at Jiva Goswami's feet hearing from him. It's a nice place to be.
The meaning Bhakti Sandarbha references that you shared. So I love them. So a couple of things. One is a reflection and another is a question here.
Speak slowly.
Okay, so one is a reflection and another is a question. So reflection is, I really like the point that you mentioned in the beginning about the Nitya Mukta and Nitya Baddha, that these are not bodily conceptions because the soul is eternally liberated. And this kind of clarified some understanding for me. And the question is, somewhere in the reading you mentioned about the Gautamiya Tantra reference, it said about japa and worshipping is not obligated for somebody who is engaged in Krishna, something like that. So maybe I misheard that.
No, you didn't mishear it. I was a little, terminology has context. So it doesn't mean when you become an advanced devotee, you don't have to chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. That's not the meaning. So you have to take another meaning besides that meaning to understand it. So there are many, 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 many mantras involved in Vedic sacrifices and so many things. So there's no need. This one is sufficient. And there's so many, so one may do the so many, but there's no need. At a certain point, there's no need. Somebody wrote to me from somewhere saying, some years ago, someone introduced me to something puja, and for 7 years I've been doing once a week something puja with such and such mantras. And now I'm chanting X number of rounds. And I want to know, should I continue or discontinue that something puja? That's the context. There's no need. Okay?
Thank you.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So a couple of questions I have. So one is with regards to when you say the false ego gets dissolved, so we have the spirit soul, and the spirit soul has senses, it has its own mind and intelligence. And, when we talk about the dissolving part, there is no transformation as such that happens, right? What happens is that we are able to realize what happens is that we are able to realize the spiritual intelligence, the spiritual mind, and the senses, which is what we eventually are looking for, right? To become realized. Is that?
You got it.
Okay. And then the second question.
What happened to false ego?
The false ego, as you said, gets dissolved, and
the whole thing gets dissolved. The covering, because that's part of the covering.
Got it.
So when that's dissolved, what's left? Not only spiritual mind, spiritual senses, spiritual intelligence,
right,
but a spiritual ego.
the true ego.
And what's the spiritual ego? The
That's the-
language that we hear consistently from our acharyas is mamata, meaning, Krishna, I am yours, and you are mine. But you are mine is not the material you are mine, like you put Krishna in your pocket, you walk down the street because now Krishna is yours. It's, I am at your service. I am yours, and you are mine. I have nothing else but my relationship with you. That's the spiritual ego. When the material ego is dissolved, that ego remains, or emerges, or becomes uncovered progressively. Next.
So with regards to bhakti, what it does to us is that the material impressions actually
The material
impressions.
impressions.
Yes. So the material impressions goes to the side, and the spiritual impressions come up front. Is that what happens?
Well, it depends. I mean, I had this interesting argument, or disagreement, I think is a better term, with Bhaktirupa, Prabhupada disciple Bhaktirupa. And we were discussing Jamunacharya's verse, where he says, when the thoughts of my previous sex life come to my mind, my lips automatically curl and I spit on the thought. So now, one position is to say, he's just speaking like he's the conditioned soul, because he really doesn't have those thoughts, because they're gone, dissolved, they're gone. Or B, because his bhakti is so strong, when those thoughts do arise, it's disdainful, smelly, and he's just like, no, let me get rid of this. So one, I won't say who had which position, but supposing, the way that Prabhupada describes it is because before he was Jamunacharya, he was previously a king. And as a king, he had indulgence in sex life. So those impressions were in his mind and they would arise. Even he's a Shuddha Bhakta. And when they would arise, it was disdainful. So how's that?
It's the lower, the higher taste gets comes into picture, right? It
Yes.
becomes lower now because of
Yeah, not only lower, but like repulsive.
repulsive. Okay.
Part of the purification for a devotee is, it's called in ISKCON impure reminiscence. And the impure reminiscence is, involvement in material affairs. I remember, just sharing, in Ojai, out here in California, there was a japa retreat that was being organized by Prusha Sukta up on a mountaintop. Really beautiful place, a Buddhist monastery that it was rented. And he was building it as a japa retreat for, I forget the adjective, but older devotees or senior devotees or something like that. And it was, from his heart, it was, his spiritual master was Bhakti Tirtha Swami, who very much said, senior devotees don't have the opportunity to come together and do things together. So he wanted to have a japa retreat with senior devotees. They can come together, do things together. So one of the attendees, it was a nice assembly, without naming the names. One of the persons who came was Rasagya, Prabhupada disciple. She and her husband, Loitaksha, joined in New York. They were theatrical people by profession. They joined the temple. Later, Loitaksha left his body in Vrindavan, some disease. She moved to Texas. She was on her own. So she came. And she had these expectations. So when we were doing our thing at the end of what was your experience, she started crying. And she said, I was so much anticipating, and as soon as I started chanting, all of these, so many ways that I've offended devotees and hurt devotees unintentionally, And it just was flooding my mind. So I had to get up, and I went outside, and it wouldn't leave my mind. And it was just, I was crushed. How many ways I've, wasn't sinful. It was just, I'll assume unintentional ways by which she hurt somebody. And it got to the point where she was crying while she was chanting. She finished 64 rounds, but she said at one point, I just threw my hands up in the air. Oh, Krishna, please purify me. And as soon as she did that, instead of struggling against, she said, the last 4 rounds, it was just I was lifted into the sky. And I was looking at a bird that was flying in the sky. It was a hawk looking for some food. But I felt like that, just flying in the sky. And that was the purpose. So rather than carrying those impressions, she got relieved from those impressions by the purification of absorption in the holy name. And supposing there wasn't that absorption in the holy name, then those impressions would still be there. In course of time, they may dissipate or whatever, but bhakti has the power to remove those things, or at least acknowledge them and move on to the place of full surrender to Krishna. So there's a place for remembrances, like Bharat became the deer and he remembered because he was an exalted devotee. Not everybody remembers the boo-boos they made in their and even in this life, we don't remember. It's stored somewhere. And it's, it's having its pressure. The impression creates pressure to replicate the same or to regret, which is, according to Bhaktivinoda Thakur, is a Vaishnav tapa. It purifies to regret. It's good. Don't be obsessed about it, but it's good. It's purification. And move on. So it can be, Krishna is in charge, and he can bring about whatever he wants to bring about, and the devotee is attached to Krishna, whatever Krishna brings about, with faith. That's this faith principle.
Makes perfect sense, Maharaj. Another question I have is with regards to faith. At the stage we are in, it looks like we are having a weak faith, and what needs to happen, as you said, is the knowledge and the realization of that knowledge, the transcendental knowledge, through the hearing process, which is what would untie the knots of false ego. And so my question as such was, so we do this constantly, and in that process our faith will get increased. Is that the understanding?
2 things. More than 2 things, but 2 things. Hearing is sadhu sangha. So by association with sadhus, there's purification. And faith increases. That's how faith begins. It's how faith grows. So according to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, even at the topmost stage, it's imperative. It's not optional. Sadhu Sangha. It's right in Chaitanya Charitamrita. So hearing is resting on Sadhu Sangha. So, you can say Sadhu Sangha, you can say hearing, but it means the same. And then you hear, then you serve. If you've heard, you serve. If you haven't heard, it's in one ear and out the other ear. You smile, but it doesn't stick. When you have that proper hearing, proper hearing is exhibited by service. Second point, yes, when you act in knowledge, you get a realization. When you get a realization, it nourishes faith. So you go back to where you heard from, and you hear some more with more faith than you did before. And that's how sadhu sangha grows, or the hearing process grows, as long as we're not complacent. Or like, Govinda Charan's question, we don't just become, okay, I'm okay now. I'm doing what's appropriate for my position and the trajectory of devotional service, and I'm okay. I stop my submission mode, and I'm just being complacent mode. So as long as that doesn't happen, and of course offenses, but then it's progressive. Faith is progressive through hearing, which means, quality sadhusanga, means quality hearing, means you act on that which you've heard, which means then you're going to get some realization. And it may not be, instantaneous, it may or may not be instantaneous. May not be what Rasigya experienced. For her, it was like, when she was describing to us, I remember it very vividly, sitting up on this mountaintop, beautiful place, and she just was breaking out in tears. She's such a sweet person. And she was, broken, but then faithful. Anyway, hearing. Anything else? You're good?
Yes, Maharaj. One last question.
Okay.
So with regards to Muchikunda that you were
Regards to
Muchikunda?
Muchikunda.
Yes. So you said that he had one thing that he had, because he performed something because of which he had to wait for 1 more year to become a pure devotee. And I was just thinking, when we chant the holy names of the Lord, our karma is
It's gone.
is gone. So what is the relevance there in terms of karma playing a role for him?
There may be multiple answers, and our Krishna doesn't say, and our acharyas don't say, so I can't say. I can say, here's some options. Krishna has some other service for him.
Makes sense. Just wanted to clarify the
Or
karma
there could be
part.
some other, here's some other options.
Sure.
Krishna wanted to teach a lesson. Another lesson is, even if you have license to do something, you don't necessarily do something. You're obligated to take responsibility for what you do. Even you're in a very elevated position, you have obligation to take responsibility for what you do. Maybe that's what Krishna wanted. And you can make some other lists. It doesn't say, so we don't know.
Sure, Maharaj.
And it's sufficient. Krishna could have said, because of your unalloyed devotion to me, no worries, you're coming to me. In this lifetime, that's it, squeaky clean. Take my hand, let's go. He could do that.
Yeah.
He had, so what was the purpose in that? We have another question over here.
Actually, that reminds me of the story of Narada's realization.
Of which one?
The Narada's realization, self-realization, when he was doing his tapasya on bank of the river, and then Krishna and Vishnu just appeared in his mind just very briefly, and then he disappeared.
Yes.
And then he said, you will not get my association further in this life. You will get only in the next life as a liberated soul, but not in this life. So that kind of...
Well, he didn't say exactly, you won't see me until your next life, but you won't see me further in this life.
Further in this life, yeah.
But I showed, because you weren't fully qualified. Normally, you don't show myself to people who are not fully qualified. But I wanted to encourage you. So do this for the rest of your life. You'll achieve perfection. Stay with it. Like that. We have something online.
I have a question too.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
Our online people will feel neglected. We're going to them next.
yes.
Okay.
Yes, one question online. Yeah, so I have a question from, like a person who sees all the astrological charts. And I see that a certain percentage, let's say 1 in 3 people, they're able to go behind what they want to do. Let's say they come into touch with devotees and they're able to pursue Krishna consciousness. They're able to stick to their lotus feet, and just continue. And there, let's say,
Others that come and go.
yeah, 2 out of 3 people might not, they might come into contact with devotees, but they pursue, impermanent things. And now, but in today's discussion, you said that once somebody comes into contact with the lotus, once somebody worships the lotus feet, then they get the benefit, and they will, Krishna will protect them, and they will be able to somehow come to a platform where they will perform those other activities, but they may still come back to being more strong. I'm not able to reconcile. How do I see this if I see situations like that?
I don't see the problem. You see a problem and I don't see a problem. So the understanding I have, if I've understood the dilemma or the doubt, consciousness may be covered, but it's not lost. If someone makes some progress and they're for a while, they're energetic and enlivened and, reviving their Krishna consciousness, and then after some time they slacken and they go somewhere and do some other stuff. That's never lost. It may be covered. And Krishna preserves that. It's a statement in Bhagavad Gita, and it's a statement in fact. And I've seen it. Now, the reasons that persons may desist or slacken can be so many. But whatever those reasons are, the bhakti that has been nourished isn't lost. It's covered.
So it appears to me that the pure devotional service is only meant for a small
Rare persons.
percentage of people who
Yes.
have the ability to stick
Well, you say
to it.
ability, and it's not. It's just the determination, and the sense of receptivity for mercy. It's those two: effort and mercy. So what's any one of us situated, seated here? What's our qualification? We could list lots of disqualification. We could think in some illusory way, I'm this qualification, that qualification. Prabhupada's statement, I wasn't there, but I heard from those that were there. You all think that because of your past piety, you're now engaged in devotional service. Don't think like that. I found you in some dark place. I grabbed you by the hair and I'm pulling you to Krishna. And you're flailing your arms and legs and I'm pulling you anyways. That's the reality. Now, there's some volition, but it's not, qualified eligibility. It's just good fortune. And then we said yes. We started doing things that teachers and teachings said, and there was a little purification and so forth. Now, staying with it requires submission and requires mercy, effort and mercy. And that those that continue to make the effort and continue to hanker for the mercy, they continue the bhakti process. And some desist for different reasons. Worldly mindedness or something, something. Offense, something. Is that all right? Can we do
Thank
it
you.
online?
Yes. The question, the chat log disappeared, but I just remembered her question. So, based on the Muchakunda story, how do you understand Krishna and Arjuna being Kshatriyas? They were also hunting.
Yes.
And how do we understand that? The reactions of the hunting.
Again, there isn't commentary by acharyas. All I know is what Krishna said to Muchakunda. Let's say it a different way. Not only Arjuna and Krishna, but anyone that performs a duty, if they perform duty, there's no karma. Prescribed duty performed, there's no karma. There's no bondage. It's work, but there's no bondage to a reaction of that work. So if someone is a Kshatriya, that Kshatriya has a duty to practice their skill. And their skill is, one of the ways to practice their skill is hunting. Or, so there may be qualitative ways that one can hunt when it's just like sport, or it's conscious, my duty is going to come to protect, and I need to practice my protection skills. So this consciousness behind may be the variable. You know, why in Muchakunda's case and why not in Arjuna's case? Or like this other question, who knows? Maybe Krishna wanted to teach something. Who knows? Maybe Krishna had some other service for Muchakunda. Who knows what Krishna's plan is? But Krishna had a plan and he said what he said. So ordinarily, a Kshatriya that carries out Kshatriya's duties, if he's engaged in battle, there's no sin. And if he's engaged in preparing himself to be effective in battle to where he can protect innocent people, there's no bondage to those preparing himself. But then the consciousness behind that activity is everything. Not just the behavior, but the consciousness behind the behavior. I mean, at least that's something, that's an explanation that for me is satisfying. You know, why in Muchakunda's case one thing and why in Arjuna's case another thing. He wanted through Muchakunda to instruct something. Okay, we'll end. Thank you very much. Prabhupada ki
Yeah.
jai.
Swami Maharaj ki.